Name's Frank Delaney. Folks mostly just call me Frank, or sometimes Old Frank if they've known me long enough. I'm sitting here on my porch this fine evening, cup o' coffee in my hand, watching the leaves fall and hearing that soft whistle of the wind through the trees. It's been one of those days where a certain memory just won't let go. Keeps floating up to the surface like a stubborn old trout in a quiet creek. And well, I reckon it's time I shared it. Before I get too deep into it, if you're feeling the vibe so far, don't be shy now. Give that like button a tap. Maybe leave a comment if you're up for it. And if you're new around here, well, why not stick around and subscribe? I promise it won't be just stories about an old trucker, but some lessons life's taught me that might just stick with you. Now, I'm thinking back to a time that was, 30-something years ago now. Yeah, 1989, the tail end of the 80s, a time when the roads seemed a little kinder and folks looked out for each other a bit more. Gas was cheap enough that you didn't have to worry about every mile, and the highways were filled with people just trying to get by, same as me. I was driving my old Kenworth truck down through Nebraska, one of those long stretches where the sun's just starting to dip low, painting the sky with those shades of orange and purple that make you stop and just watch for a minute. That's the kind of moment when the day feels stretched thin and thick all at once. Peaceful, but charged with a sort of quiet expectant. That's when I saw it. A beat-up Chevy Nova sitting off to the side of the road, hood up, steam rolling out like it had a story of its own to tell. Next to it, this young fella, eyes darting around, looking like he was wrestling with more than just a busted engine. He was on his way to see his wife, who'd been rushed to the hospital. The kind of worry that sits heavy in your gut, felt like the kind of trouble that weighs you down more than a ton of bricks. Now, I ain't one to turn my back on someone in a jam, not after all these years behind the wheel. So I pulled over, got my hands dirty, and helped him get that Chevy running again. Didn't ask for a dime, didn't expect one, just figured I was doing what any decent man would. His name was Mike, though I only found that out later. He was grateful, real grateful, and that stuck with me. You see, that night's memory, it ain't just about a busted car or a ride down the highway. It's about how a small thing, a little kindness, a moment taken to help a stranger, can echo through time in ways you'd never imagine. And, well, that's what keeps that night burning in my heart all these years later. Sometimes, it's like the past reaches out to you, nudges you, saying, don't forget this. Remember the good in folks. And I reckon that's what I'm doing here, sharing this with you, hoping you feel that too. So, sit back, pour yourself a drink if you got one handy, and let me tell you how that night wasn't just a one-time thing, how it turned into something that changed the course of my own story a decade later. If you ever wondered how one small act can come back around, well, maybe this story's for you. When I close my eyes and let that memory come alive, I'm not just seeing that night in Nebraska. No, sir, I'm drifting way back to the place where it all started, back to a little farm outside of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. That's where I grew up, a kid with dusty boots and a head full of dreams bigger than the endless prairie sky. It was the late 40s then, right after the war, and the world was trying to find its feet again. Folks worked hard, real hard, from sunup to sundown. My pa was a farmer, and my ma kept the house running like a well-oiled machine. They taught me the value of honest work and kindness, though sometimes it felt like kindness was as rare as rain in a drought. But that's what I believed back then, that good folks made the world go round, and that a simple act of kindness could change a man's whole day, maybe even his life. I was just a scrappy young boy, running barefoot through fields of tall grass, chasing after chickens and dreaming of the road. I'd stare up at those big, wide-open skies, thinking about what lay beyond the horizon, wondering if I'd ever get to see it. My ma used to say, "Frankie, the world's a big place, but kindness makes it smaller." I carried that with me, tucked it in my heart like a secret. School was a small one-room building, full of kids who all knew each other's names, where we learned our letters and numbers by day and listened to our pa's stories of the war by night. Those stories were heavy, but they held lessons too, about courage, about sacrifice, and about never turning your back on someone who needs you. When I got a little older, I remember standing on the porch of our house, looking down the gravel road, thinking about what my future might hold. I was a bit shy, maybe, but I had a stubborn streak a mile wide. I figured if I could just be a good man, someone folks could count on, that would be enough. I wasn't thinking about riches or fame, just about living a life with some meaning. I had dreams all right, but they were simple ones: to work hard, to raise a family, to have a place to call home. I believed, plain and simple, that kindness was the strongest thing a man could offer. And maybe, just maybe, that kindness would come back around when I needed it most. Those days weren't always easy, the seasons could be harsh, and sometimes folks had more troubles than they had smiles. But there was a rhythm to life then, steady and sure, like the ticking of an old clock on the kitchen wall. Sunday dinners with the whole family gathered round, church on Sundays, and summer nights sitting by the fire, staring up at the sky, talking about hopes and dreams and the kind of world we wanted to live in. That's the world I came from, a world where people looked after each other because they had to, because it was the right thing to do. And you know, sometimes I wonder if that world is still out there somewhere, tucked away beneath all the noise and hurry of today. But I hold on to it, keep it close. It's why that night on the highway stuck with me so hard, because it reminded me of those early lessons, those old truths about kindness and human connection. When you're young, you think the world is endless, that the good you put out will always find its way back to you. Life, it turns out, sometimes takes its own sweet time to prove that right. But I never stopped believing. I never stopped hoping. And I reckon that's what's kept me going all these years. So when I tell you about that night, about the stranger named Mike and the kindness that started it all, it's more than just a story about a broken down car on the side of the road. It's about the kind of world I grew up in, the kind of man I wanted to be, and the kind of life I hope to live, a life where every small good deed is a thread in the big quilt of who we are. That's the memory I'm holding on to, and that's the one I want you to remember too. I reckon life has a funny way of throwing curveballs right when you least expect 'em. There I was, a young fella just getting used to the steady rhythm of farm life and small-town days, thinking I had the world figured out. But then, one afternoon, out of nowhere, something, or maybe someone, came along and changed everything. It wasn't some grand fireworks moment, not like in the movies. No, sir, it was quiet, gentle, and yet it stirred something deep down inside me that I couldn't ignore. It was the spring of '56. I was 17 then, just about ready to leave school and figure out what the next chapter was gonna be. The air was thick with that fresh, earthy smell you get when the snow melts and the dirt wakes up from winter's long nap. I was heading into town to pick up some supplies when I first saw her. Mary. She was standing outside the general store, her hair catching the sunlight like a field of golden wheat, and she had a smile that seemed to light up even the dullest corners of that old place. I don't rightly remember what she said first. It was more about how she made me feel. My heart, well, it just started beating a little faster, like it was trying to catch up with a sudden change in the wind. I remember thinking, what in the world is this? I couldn't explain it. I'd never felt anything like that before, this mix of excitement and nervousness, like you're standing on the edge of something big, but you don't quite know what it is yet. She wasn't just another face in the crowd. Mary was different. She was kind, sure, but there was a fire in her eyes, a spark of something wild and free that made me want to be better, do better. And for a young man who'd spent most of his days working fields and learning to drive tractors, that was a whole new kind of adventure. That spring turned into summer, and Mary became a part of every moment, walking through town, sitting by the river, talking about dreams and hopes like they were as solid as the ground beneath our feet. She believed in kindness too, just like my ma taught me, but she also believed in fighting for what you want, even if the road gets rough. I guess you could say she was my first real glimpse of the world beyond those farm fences, a world full of possibilities and risks and, well, love. But life's never just sunshine and easy roads, is it? Right in the middle of all that young love and daydreaming, something else came along that I never saw coming. My pa got sick, real sick. One day he was out in the fields like always, and the next he was bedridden, fighting for every breath. That kind of hit me harder than I thought it would. It was a reminder that life's fragile and that sometimes the good times don't last as long as you hope. Mary stuck by me through all of it, holding my hand when I felt like falling, reminding me that even in the darkest storms, there's a light worth reaching for. I didn't know then how much those months would shape the man I'd become, how I learned that kindness ain't just about helping strangers on the side of the road, but about standing by the people you love when they need you most. I didn't realize that the fire Mary carried would burn in me long after the fields had been plowed and the seasons had changed. And I surely didn't know that someday, years down the line, those lessons about love, loss, and loyalty would come back around in a way that would save my very life. So yeah, that moment, meeting Mary, watching my pa's strength fade, feeling my own heart beat a little faster and break a little too, it was the spark that lit a path through all the twists and turns ahead. I can still feel it sometimes, like a soft whisper on the wind, reminding me of who I am and what really matters. And that's the kind of story I want to share with you next, the one about how sometimes the smallest moments can change everything. Life has a way of throwing a wrench into the best laid plans, I tell ya. I remember those days like they were yesterday, when the road ahead suddenly got rocky and the easy rhythm I'd known just slipped right through my fingers. After Mary and I had found our little patch of happiness, and after my pa fell ill, it felt like the whole world was pressing down on me, heavier than I could bear. You see, back then, folks around here weren't always kind to those who struggled. There was a certain pride about toughing it out, keeping your troubles to yourself, and God help you if you showed any weakness. That was the way it was in my town, and it made those hard times even harder. My pa's sickness was just the start of it. He got weaker by the day, and the bills piled up like a snowdrift in a Dakota winter. Mary did her best to keep my spirits up, but even she couldn't shield me from the weight of it all. I started feeling like I was losing my grip, scared, angry, and ashamed that I couldn't fix what was breaking. And to make matters worse, some folks in the community started whispering, pointing fingers like maybe I wasn't man enough to hold things together. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. I wanted to scream at him, tell him to mind their own business, but that ain't the way I was raised. So I kept my mouth shut and my head down, swallowing the pain and the doubt. At night, when the house was quiet and the weight of the day settled in, I'd lie awake wondering if I was letting everyone down. I felt caught between two worlds, the one where I was supposed to be strong and steady, and the one where I was just a scared young man trying to hold on. It was like there was this storm brewing inside me that I didn't know how to face. I felt guilty for getting mad at Mary when she was the one trying to keep me together. I felt helpless watching my pa fade away, and deep down, I was scared that maybe I'd never be the man I dreamed of being. The worst part was that I felt alone in all of it. Sure, Mary stuck by me, her hand in mine through the darkest nights, but outside that, I didn't have much. Friends I thought I could count on started drifting away, uncomfortable with the trouble and the talk. Family was busy with their own lives, and I didn't want to burden them with my mess. So I carried it all inside, a secret weight that felt like it was crushing me from the inside out. But here's the thing about those hard times, they teach you things you don't learn in school or from a preacher. They teach you about grit, about hanging on when every part of you wants to let go. And even though I didn't realize it then, those struggles were shaping me, making me tougher, even if it didn't feel like it at the time. I remember sitting on that porch some evenings, just watching the sun go down and wondering how things got so complicated. I wished for a sign, some kind of light in the dark, something to tell me it was going to be all right. And in those moments, Mary's voice was like that light, gentle, steady, reminding me that no matter how bad it gets, you gotta keep moving. She never gave up on me, even when I wanted to give up on myself. She was the one person who saw through the tough exterior and believed in the man I could be. But the doubts didn't just disappear overnight. There were days I felt like I was fighting two battles, one outside with the world and one inside my own head. I wrestled with fear and shame, wondering if I was really cut out for this life, if I was good enough. And that, my friend, is a heavy burden for any man to carry. Looking back now, I realize those were the days that set the stage for everything that came after. They taught me that life ain't fair, and sometimes the hardest thing you can do is ask for help. But they also taught me that kindness, whether it's given or receiving, can be the strongest thing you hold on to when the world tries to tear you down. So yeah, those first real hardships, they nearly broke me, but they didn't. And that's a story I'm still learning to tell. I remember the day like it was carved into the very marrow of my bones. It was the kind of day that makes time stand still. The clock on the wall might as well have stopped ticking, because in that moment, nothing else mattered. You know, sometimes life hits you so hard you feel like the ground's been pulled out from underneath, and you're left standing on air, trying to catch your breath. That day, that moment, was one of those times for me. It was '67, and the war in Vietnam was roaring louder than ever. I'd already been drafted, spent months away from home, away from Mary, away from everything I knew and loved. But that letter, that goddamn letter, came through the mail like a thunderbolt. It wasn't what I wanted to hear, and it sure wasn't what I was prepared for. It said my pa had passed, just like that, gone. The man who'd taught me what it meant to be a man, to stand tall no matter the storms, he was gone. I was sitting in a dingy barracks somewhere halfway across the world when I read those words. My hand shook, and my heart felt like it had been crushed by a freight train. For a moment, the noise of the war faded away. All I could hear was the pounding in my own chest, loud and raw. I remember thinking, no, this can't be real. But it was. It was real, and it hit me like a punch to the gut. I couldn't go home right away. Orders kept me where I was, but my mind was back on that farm, on my mind, Mary, and on the empty chair at the dinner table. The man who'd been my rock, my guide, was gone, and for the first time, I felt like I was truly alone. It was a kind of loneliness that wraps around you like a cold fog, seeping into every crack and crevice of your soul. I cried then, something I'd never done before. Not like that, because sometimes a man's heart breaks in silence, and sometimes it just shatters out loud. Losing my pa changed everything. It forced me to grow up faster than I ever wanted to. I realized then that life doesn't wait for you to be ready. It just keeps on rolling, whether you're ready or not. And sometimes, the people you love the most are gone before you get the chance to say goodbye. That truth, cold and unforgiving, settled into me like a stone in my chest. I also realized I had to make some hard choices. Mary and I, we talked about the future, about what we wanted, about the life we hoped to build. But without my pa, without his steady hand and wise words, everything felt uncertain. The man who once seemed so invincible had been taken away, and I had to find a way to be strong for the both of us. That weight, that responsibility, sat heavy on my shoulders, but it also lit a fire inside me. A fire to keep going, to honor his memory by living a life that mattered. That loss taught me about grief, yes, but it also taught me about resilience. About the stubbornness it takes to keep standing when the world tries to knock you down. I learned that sometimes you have to let yourself break before you can be put back together again, stronger and wiser. And I learned that love, real love, is what carries you through the darkest nights. Looking back, I can still see that day so clearly. The way the sunlight streamed through the barracks window, the heaviness in my chest, the ache in my soul. I remember how time felt like it stopped, and all that was left was the raw, aching truth. And though it was the hardest moment of my life, it was also the one that shaped everything that came after. Because after that day, I wasn't just Frank the boy from South Dakota anymore. I was Frank the man who'd faced loss and come out the other side. A man who'd learned that even in the face of heartbreak, there's hope. That even when everything seems lost, there's a chance to rebuild. And that sometimes, the hardest road you walk leads you to where you're meant to be. After that storm passed, the loss, the heartbreak, the shattering of everything I thought I knew, there came a long stretch of quiet. A kind of silence that wasn't peaceful but heavy, like a thick fog settle over a cold morning. I remember those days well, days when the world seemed to lose its color, and every breath felt harder than the last. The farm, the fields, even the sky overhead, they all looked different somehow. Not bad, but changed, like I'd been looking through a cracked window that couldn't quite let the light in the same way anymore. I wasn't the same man I'd been before. Hell, I wasn't sure if I was the man I wanted to be anymore. The weight of losing my pa, the war, and all the troubles that piled up after, it shook my faith in a lot of things. Faith in myself, in the goodness of people, in the idea that life's supposed to be fair or kind. I felt a hollow place inside me grow, a quiet ache that wouldn't go away no matter how hard I tried to push it down. Some days, I'd sit on that porch, just staring at the road that led out of town, wondering if I'd ever find my way back to the man I once was. The nights were the hardest. The silence in the house felt loud, echoing all the things I didn't say, the hopes I'd lost, the dreams that seemed to slip through my fingers like grains of sand. Mary was there, steady as ever, but even her warmth couldn't fill that emptiness inside me. I felt alone in a crowd, like I was carrying a weight nobody else could see or understand. I struggled to find meaning in those days. The simple truths I'd held on to since I was a boy, kindness, love, hard work, they felt fragile now, like thin glass ready to shatter at the slightest touch. I questioned if it was all worth it, if being good, being kind, was enough in a world that could be so cruel. I wrestled with anger, with regret, with a sadness that ran deeper than I ever thought possible. But life, as it always does, kept moving. The seasons changed, the fields needed tending, and the sun rose and set like it had a plan of its own. And slowly, in the quiet moments between one day and the next, I started to reckon with what had happened. I started to realize that maybe, just maybe, there was a way to carry the loss without letting it break me completely. That pain, as heavy as it was part of the story, part of the man I was becoming. It wasn't easy. There were days when the past felt like a shadow that followed me everywhere, reminding me of what I'd lost and what I might never get back. But there were also moments, small ones, when the sun would catch the leaves just right, where a bird would sing a song that made me smile, and I'd feel a flicker of hope. Those little sparks were enough to keep me going, even when the darkness threatened to swallow me whole. I learned to sit with the silence, to let the ache be there without fighting it, to find peace in the pause and strength in the stillness. I came to understand that sometimes life doesn't give you clear answers or easy paths. Sometimes it just asks you to keep breathing, keep walking, even when you don't know where you're headed. And in that quiet, in that stillness, I found a new kind of faith, not the loud, proud kind I thought I'd always need, but a softer, humbler kind. A faith in the slow work of healing, in the power of time to mend even the deepest wounds. A faith that kindness, even when it feels small or lonely, can still change the world, starting with yourself. So that's where I was for a long while, caught between what was and what might be, learning to live with the loss and hold on to the hope. A different man, sure, but maybe a wiser one too. And maybe that's the way it's supposed to be. You know, after being lost in that long stretch of quiet and shadow, there comes a time when something, maybe a thought, a moment, or a stranger's smile nudges you awake. It's like the first warm ray of sunlight breaking through a cloudy sky, gentle but steady enough to make you believe the day might just get better. For me, that moment came not with a grand gesture, but with a small act that reminded me why I'd kept on going all those years. One afternoon, I was driving through a nearby town, just taking a little time for myself, when I saw an old man on the side of the road. His car had broken down, and he looked lost and frustrated. Now, I've been helped plenty of times in my life, and I knew what that felt like, so I pulled over without thinking twice, got under the hood with him, tinkered a bit, and managed to get his car running again. The relief on his face, well, it was like I'd done something more than fix a motor. It felt like I'd helped patch a small tear in the fabric of the world. That little moment sparked something inside me. It was a reminder of who I was, who I wanted to be. That kindness I believed in as a boy, the kindness I'd seen in Mary and my pa, it wasn't gone. It was still there, waiting to be passed on. And just like that, I felt a little fiery kindling in my chest, a quiet push saying, "Keep going, Frank. You ain't done yet." Sometimes, hope doesn't roar in like a storm. Sometimes it's just a whisper in the wind, a soft light in a dark room. And that's what this was for me, a whisper that grew louder with each day, encouraging me to take another step, to find a new purpose. I started to think about all the roads I'd driven, all the people I'd met, and the ways I could still make a difference, no matter how small. I began talking on little projects around the house, helping neighbors when they needed an extra hand, and even started writing down some of my stories, the kind you don't always tell out loud, but that means something deep down. It felt good to give back, to connect again with folks who understood the weight and the wonder of a life lived hard but full. That slow rebuild gave me a new sense of peace, a second chance at being the man I'd hoped to be. It wasn't about grand gestures or big changes. It was about finding meaning in the everyday moments, the small acts of kindness, and the quiet bonds that hold us all together. I realized that life's not about perfection or getting it all right. It's about keeping your heart open, even when it's hard, and choosing hope over despair, one day at a time. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is this: sometimes, when you think you've reached the end of the road, life hands you a detour. And if you're lucky and willing, that detour can lead you to a new beginning. For me, that new beginning was born out of a simple moment of helping a stranger, a moment that reminded me that the kindness I gave and received all those years ago still has power. And that power is enough to light the way forward. There comes a time in a man's life when he's got to look himself square in the eye and reckon with the past, all of it, the good, the bad, and the things that haunt you in the quiet hours. For me, that moment came slow, but when it hit hard. I realized that I'd been carrying a lot of weight, grief, regret, anger, things that had kept me chained to a version of myself I didn't want to be anymore. It wasn't easy, no sir, but it was necessary. I remember one afternoon sitting on that same porch I've told you about, watching the wind stir the leaves and thinking about all those years gone by. I pulled out an old leather journal, one I hadn't touched in a good while, and started reading through my younger self scribbles. Dreams I'd had, promises I'd made, mistakes I wished I could undo. I felt a swell of emotions, sadness, yes, but also a strange kind of peace. It was like finally fastened. Those ghosts allowed me to start letting them go. That day, I made a choice. I decided I wasn't going to let the past define me anymore. I wasn't going to let the losses and the pain bury me alive. I was going to live truly live from here on out. No more carrying grudges, no more wallowing in what could have been. Just forward, one step at a time. I told myself, Frank, you've been through the fire, but you ain't burned up yet. It's time to stand up and keep walking. And you know, sometimes that kind of decision ain't marked by some big, dramatic gesture. For me, it was simple but powerful. I went out to the barn and found an old box filled with letters and keepsakes, reminders of pain and regret I'd held on to for too long. I took that box and carried it out to the edge of the property, where the wind blows free and the sky stretches wide. I set it down and lit a match. Watching the flames dance and swallow those pieces of my past, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was like telling those ghosts, thank you for the lessons, but it's time to let you go. From that day on, I started seeing life with new eyes. I didn't forget where I'd come from or what I'd been through, but I stopped letting it control me. I forgave the mistakes, mine and others. I opened my heart a little wider, even when it scared me. I chose hope over fear, kindness over bitterness. And slowly, that choice began to change everything. I started reaching out more, to Mary, to old friends, to neighbors I'd lost touch with. I took on new challenges, even when I wasn't sure I could handle them. I found joy in the little things again, a sunset, a laugh, the feel of a warm breeze on my face. Life didn't suddenly become perfect, far from it, but it became mine again, full of possibility and peace. And if there's one thing this old man's learned, it's this: you can't change the past, but you sure as hell can choose how you carry it. You can let it break you, or you can let it build you. I chose to be built, stronger, wiser, kinder. And that choice, well, that's the one I'd want to pass on to anyone listening. So here I am, still sitting on this porch, still watching the world go by, but with a heart a little lighter and a spirit a little freer. I've learned that life's a gift, messy, unpredictable, and beautiful in its own way. And no matter what's happened, there's always a chance to start again, to live without regrets, to keep moving forward. That's what I've chosen. That's the road I'm walking now. And I hope, if you're listening, you might find a little courage to walk it too. You know, after all these years, I've come to understand that life ain't about grand moments or big victories. It's about the small, quiet truths you carry with you through the dust and the sunshine. When I look back on the road I've traveled, from that little farm outside Sioux Falls to the long highways and all the people I met along the way, I see now that the real lessons weren't shouted from mountaintops. No, they were whispered in the pauses, in the moments when I thought no one was watching, In the times I helped a stranger or was helped myself, I learned that kindness isn't just some feel-good notion. It's the glue that holds us all together when everything else seems to fall apart. It's the quiet strength that keeps a man going when his own legs are tired, the hand that reaches out when you're lost on the side of the road. And I reckon that's the kind of strength that doesn't get talked about much, the kind that's found in the everyday decisions to care, to forgive, to keep on trying, even when it'd be easier to give up. I also came to see that life's timing ain't always what we expect. Sometimes, the help you give today might not come back for years, or maybe it comes in a form you never imagined. I remember that night in Nebraska when I helped a young man with his broken down car, never guessing that he'd be the one to save my life a decade later. It's a reminder that the world has its own way of balancing things out, and sometimes we're part of a bigger story we don't even know we're writing. Another thing I figured out is that grief and loss don't disappear. They change shape and find new ways to sit beside you. But you learn to live with them, and you learn to keep moving forward anyway. It ain't about forgetting or pretending it never happened. It's about making peace with the past so you can make room for what's still to come. That's a hard truth, but it's a freeing one. And maybe most importantly, I've learned that it's never too late to start again, to make a new choice, to find new meaning, to open your heart just a little wider. We don't have to be stuck in the mistakes or the pain of yesterday. Every day offers a chance, even if it's just a small one, to be better, to love more, to live fuller. So, if there's one thing I'd want to leave with you, it's this. Maybe it's time to stop waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect chance, or the perfect person to come along and fix everything. Maybe the time is now, right where you're standing. Maybe the kindness you give, the courage you muster, and the love you hold on to are the very things that'll carry you through whatever comes next. Life's a long road, full of twists, turns, and sometimes a few potholes. But it's also full of beautiful moments, moments of connection, hope, and redemption. And it's those moments, the quiet truths and small acts of grace, that make it all worth the walk. So, here's to the journey, and here's to finding your own way forward. One step, one breath, and one kind act at a time. Well now, here we are at the end of this little journey I've been sharing with you. I hope you felt what I felt, that mix of memory and hope, pain and kindness, loss and a little bit of light shining through. You know, stories like these, they ain't just about what happened back then. They're about today, right now, and maybe even tomorrow. They remind us that the past shapes us, sure, but it doesn't have to hold us captive. We carry those memories with us, but it's what we do with them that really counts. I've been thinking a lot lately about love, real love, the kind that sticks with you through thick and thin, the kind that shows up when you least expect it, maybe in a broken down car on the side of the road, or in a quiet word from a friend, or in the laughter shared on a porch swing under a setting sun. Love isn't always loud or flashy. Sometimes it's just there, steady and true, like the earth beneath your feet. So I want to ask you, from one heart to another, do you believe that true love has a way of coming back, not just in the way we remember it, but in the ways that matter most, through forgiveness, through second chances, through the simple acts of kindness that ripple out and circle back? Sometimes I wonder if the love I shared with Mary, the dreams we built, and the pain we carried still lingers out there somewhere. Sometimes I think maybe she remembers, even if just a little, and that thought brings me a kind of peace. Life, I've learned, is full of mysteries. We don't always get the answers we want, and sometimes the questions themselves are what keep us moving forward. That's why I'm not here to tell you how your story should go, or what you should believe. I'm just here to share a truth I've found along the way, that kindness, love, and hope, they're not just words. They're the ties that bind us all together, across time and distance and the spaces in between. And so, as we part ways for now, I leave you with this, a little spark to carry in your pocket on your own road. Think about the people you've helped, the kindness you've received, and the love that's touched your life in whatever form it's taken. Maybe it's time to reach out, to forgive, to give a little more than you think you can. Maybe it's time to believe in the power of second chances and the quiet magic that happens when you least expect it. Thank you for listening to an old man ramble on about roads traveled and hearts healed. I hope you found a bit of your own story in mine. And if you ever find yourself stuck on the side of life's highway, remember, there's always someone willing to stop and help. Sometimes, it's the kindness you give that brings you back to yourself. So tell me, friend, what do you think? Is true love something that should, or even can come back? I'd be mighty curious to hear your thoughts. Maybe leave a comment, share your own story, or just hold that question closed for a little while. Because sometimes, it's the questions that keep the heart alive. And who knows, sometimes, when the wind is just right and the stars are out, I swear I can feel her Mary right there beside me. And that's a feeling I wouldn't trade for all the miles I've driven.